come here. Come here, quick, quick, quick. Pedal, pedal, pedal. Quick, quick, quick. Guess what?
What?
It worked.
You're the same boy I never saw.
Oh, I don't know what you just said. Right, so crisis averted. We have juke hub, and we have the Versa transmission. Splines are in. You notice there's a gap here. That's just to go over the seal, not the end of the world. This can also get pushed forward, but the seal is tight on there. So this is a B16 Sentra MR18 automatic axle, and it fits. The length's a little off, but it should still work. Pardon the interruptions. I'm trying to do this with a 5-year-old. So we have an axle. The other axle's in here. I got them from Rock Auto just because it's cheap. The other axle's in there. Now this version of these axles, the passenger side one, doesn't use a carrier bearing. It's just a long axle, and that's just going to create torque steer issues, which we'll figure out. But that's exciting. You can see here, this is a manual transmission juke axle. Obviously the location of where the differential is going to be slightly different. So if we line these up, spline edge to spline edge, you can see this one's a little bit longer, not by much. So we should be in good shape there. So this is a flex plate off of a CVT juke, and we can see that ain't gonna work. So we'll just have to get a flex plate off a 09 Versa. Not a big deal. They're like 50 bucks. Just get a used one. And it will bolt up because the MR cranks are all the same bolt pattern. So easy fix. Now to get into making this thing work. Now these right here are the important wires. This is basically our park neutral safety switch. Tells you what gear it's in. We're not worried about that right now. I looked through everything to try to find a pinout for this connector, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So we're gonna have to do a little research. So I found a picture of the valve body with everything labeled on it. And what we're gonna do is essentially take the pan off and then follow the wires to where they go, and that'll tell me what wire does what, so we can work on finishing up the programming to run this thing. I also, got all kinds of other data on here. There's like 40 pages here that I'm gonna be able to use to figure out how to get this thing to work. But for the time being, we gotta figure out this wiring harness. So I'm gonna flip this thing over, take the pan off of it. I gotta set a bucket up down there to catch the fluid that's inevitably gonna fall out of this thing. Take the pan out of it, and we'll go from there. It definitely wasn't empty. Thank God this table's designed the way it is. All right. This is actually what I made this table for, is doing engine and transmission disassemblies. So it all drains from the end there. All right, so let's compare to the picture I have, because something's already not looking right to me. We have, oh no, that's pretty accurate. Oh, okay, so this cover is not on there. That's the difference. All right, so I gotta get a pen and a notepad so I can start writing what does what. So the good news is, from what I can see, is this is all, I don't want to call it self-grounding, but it's grounded to the transmission itself. So it's only one wire going to every solenoid. In this case, it's a wire going to ground, and then that wire, which means the rest of these, from what I can tell, are self-grounding. So that's good. So we're really gonna have just wire per solenoid. And then this is the temperature sensor, I believe. And they say that it's cut off on this diagram I printed, but TO, I'm assuming temperature of some kind. All right, so let me write down what goes to what pin on here so that we can sort this thing out. All right, so we got our connector view from the top. I have to figure out what this is for. Fairly certain that's like forward and reverse. That's cut off here, so I'm gonna have to find that picture again somehow. I got everything labeled, so that's pretty straightforward. What I'm gonna do now is just spray some cleaner in here. I'm leaving this off just because when I test the connections, I want to be able to hear each solenoid to make sure I'm doing the right ones. But I'm going to clean this up so that we can get some of this fluid off the table, because I'm going to have to do some wiring stuff up here. So this is the easy part. All the easy stuff's done. Now we got to get to the hard part, which is actually programming this thing. So we're going to verify that real quick, and then I'm going to hop on the computer and I'm going to make a chart of everything that I need to do to make this thing potentially work. Okay, so this is essentially all that there is to control the transmission as far as what we're doing. We don't need speed or anything like that. So this is what our gear layout is, when we're in reverse and neutral, what the setup needs to be, what our different outputs are. So we have all of this, and with that we have come up with this. Now, this looks like a lot of stuff, right? But it's actually really simple. I hate to say that because, you know, the stuff is kind of complicated, but play with me for a second here. So the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to have upshift and downshift buttons, so paddle shifters essentially. And then we need a throttle position to determine how much line pressure we're going to have. Then we have our outputs here for our solenoids. Pretty straightforward. You know, we have to control what is doing what. So, you know, shift solenoid A position, shift solenoid B position, torque converter lockup, how much line pressure we have, and then our overrun solenoid, which we're not really messing with yet for what we're doing, because we just need to see if this works. We need to see our park and neutral position. So that's right here, as you can see by my notes. We have to know when we're in reverse. The reason we need to know that is because our A and B positions are going to change depending on if we are in park or reverse. So I'm making it right now, so when everything turns on, it's just in first gear. It's just starting in first gear if we're in drive. That it's going to be that simple. I mean, we're going to have to change that in the future, but I have to come up with a way to keep that memory. This right here just sets up what each pin is going to be doing as far as an input or an output goes. I'm going to have an LCD screen to display, you know, things like the gear, what gear we're in, and what things are doing. So this is where we start getting into the first of the driving stuff. So we have to read what our throttle position is to determine our line pressures. And then we need to know if we're in park or if we're in reverse. So it's going to read these pins. If we are in neutral or reverse, then we're just going to basically update the LCD to say that, update the LCD to say that. Otherwise, it's going to say the gear. An initial value is going to be 1. Oops. And that'll update as we go. So here we get into the actual solenoids for positions. So we have to read what gear we're in, what last gear we're in, how long our shift times are going to be, and if we're going to be dropping our line pressures, because between shifts, the line pressure needs to drop to allow everything to move around, or it's going to slam into gear, which can cause some problems. So if we're in park or neutral, we're just going to shut all the solenoids off. So set them to low. That way nothing happens. We're going to set our line pressure to 0. So nothing's going to happen. If we're in reverse, we need shift solenoid A on high. The rest of them can be low. And then for now, we're going to be starting off with like a medium line pressure to see if that's enough to do that. So we've made it so that the shift delay is dependent on the throttle position, basically is what it is. So line pressure, how long we drop it for, is going to depend on a throttle position as well. And then this right here is just our gear change. So, you know, these are shift solenoid A high, lock up, low, low. So I just showed you on that chart, you know, what everything needs to be. And I have it set up so that case 5, which I'm calling gear 5, is basically torque converter lockup. We're just locking the torque converter up. That's going to be our 5th gear. That's just for now. There are situations in other gears where you need to have the lockup on as well. I'm going to play with that. This is just to kind of get this thing tested. And then this is the output for the line pressure. This is all LCD upgrades, the update stuff. So it's that simple. I know that's like a lot, and it's a lot at once, but when you break it down into its chunks, it's pretty straightforward. Now, this is not how your automatic transmission works at home at all. There's torque load calculations and things like that, which determines when you're going to shift. You have to have speed inputs, which I'm going to set up. There is a speed sensor on the transmission that I can use to do that. But for now, just want to see if this thing is going to work, if it's going to shift, if it's going to drive. So we have this laid out. I have Arduinos on standby so that we can, you know, make a temporary wire setup for this and hook this up. But now I need to show you how we're going to test this. So we need to get this in a car to test it. You know, there's only, what, 7 wires that need to get hooked up. So it's not rocket science as far as wiring it goes. We got the axles figured out. We got to get a flex plate. That's the only thing missing for that. So this isn't rocket science, but we got to test it in a car. We can't test it on the bench. We can test, you know, if the solenoids are triggering, but that's it. So we need to get this in a car. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to put this transmission onto this engine. This is a completely stock MR-A8 DE. We picked it up for like, I think, what, 170 bucks or something like that. Dumb cheap, 60,000 miles. These things are just ridiculously cheap. I love how cheap these are. So we're gonna put it on that engine, but then we need to put it on a car. That is where this comes in. So this is our shop test vehicle, or race car, if you would. If you've been watching the channel, you'll know that we need to O-ring the engine that's in here so that we can make more power. But that means that we're going to have basically a rolling, ready-to-go shell sitting here. So what we're going to do is transfer over all of the wiring and stuff that's on this engine onto that A8 that you just saw. Get a smaller, like, eBay turbo, which I've got a pile of them to choose from, just because we're going to want to have a turbo on there so we can see exactly what the transmission can handle once we get it working. So that is all going to go in here, and this is going to be our test car. Now, on top of this being a test car for the Arduino control, we are going to see if we can get this to run the transmission. Now, if we can get this to run the transmission, sweet. There's a lot more pre-programmed stuff in there to make this work a lot easier. If we can't, we can't. You know, this is just an experiment to see if this is going to be a viable option to replace the CVTs instead of doing manual swaps. Hopefully this works. If this does end up working in this car and we can get it reliable, the plan is to get the upgraded clutch system that is sold for that automatic transmission. Then we're going to put this whole thing in that. So my daily driver Cube is a 6-speed, you know, 402 horsepower. I love it. I love having the manual. It's loads of fun to drive, but it would be nice to make it so that other people can enjoy it, even if they don't know how to drive stick. Third gear is pretty much dead in this thing. It's got, you know, a lot of miles on it. So, and we've been putting a lot of power through it. So I have to shift into third very slowly. So it needs a transmission rebuilt or removed anyway. Not saying I can't drive it. Again, it gets driven all the time. But I'm gonna try to put the automatic in here. That's the plan anyway. That is gonna depend on if the transmission can hold the power that we need it to. The goal on the automatic will initially to get it to hold 300 horsepower on an A8. Don't know if that's going to happen. There's not really a lot of people out there that have pushed these that far. Even the upgraded clutch systems, I can't find anybody with numbers as far as how much torque they've put through them, so we don't know. because of how cheap these are too, I might get a second valve body and have it sent out to a transmission company and see if they can either find a way to increase my line pressure or whatever they do. To be honest, I don't know enough about valve body modifications to even talk about what they would do to it. But I want to see if they can do something to it to get it to hold more torque. So that is the plan. So the next step is going to be get the race car in, strip that down so that we can get to fixing up that engine, not fixing it, but upgrading it with the O-rings, and go from there. So the next video on this will be after we get the race car taken apart, which will be its own video. And as soon as the race car is taken apart, this and that are going to get bolted into it. The only thing I have to do to this is the race car has a modified cam wheel so that we don't have to run an external trigger wheel. On this one, we're going to put the external trigger wheel on it. That's just a little bit of wiring I have to change on the race car. Not a big deal. So that is where we're going to leave off here. So this is looking like it's going to work. The next video you see will be me testing the code that we did to make sure that things happen as they should. We'll hear the ticking and all that stuff. I'm not going to do that in this video just because this video has already been really technically deep. And, you know, testing this will take me all of 2 seconds on camera. And then if it works, it's going right in the car.
Like and subscribe, guys.